BBC caught up in another editing scandal, accused of editing audience reactions to show them clapping rather than laughing at Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Oof, that's damning. Good way to lose a reputation. Edit. The truth is BBC has always been a media arm of the British state, especially foreign policy. That's an essential part of the network's origin story. The BBC lost their reputation a long time ago, when they cancelled their own Panorama documentary exposing Jimmy Savile. Edit. It was BBC Newsnight, not Panorama. Double edit. Jones, who first broke the scandal, was terminated from the BBC in February 2015. McKeon, who was also involved in the Newsnight report, left the BBC in early 2013, and stated, "When the Savile scandal broke, the BBC tried to smear my reputation." Tom Giles, the editor of Panorama, that aired the investigation on Savile on the 22nd of October 2012, is now in an administrative position at BBC. Clive Edwards, who was commissioning editor for Current Affairs, oversaw the Panorama documentary. That's for the previous reputation. This ruins their current reputation. The directors of the firm hired to continue the reputation after the other people had been sacked wish it to be known that they have just been sacked. The reputation has been completed in an entirely different style at great expense and at the last minute. Executive producer John Goldston and RALPH The Wonder Llama producer Mark Forstater assisted by Earl J. Llama Mike Q Llama 3 Psi Llama Merrill Z Llama 9th directed by 40 specially trained Ecuadorian Mountain Llamas 6 Venezuelan Red Llamas 142 Mexican Whooping Llamas 14 North Chilean Guanacos, closely related to the llama, Reg Llama. Of Brixton 76,000 battery llamas from Llama Fresh Farms Limited. Near Paraguayan Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones. As an American, I have always had great respect for BBC, but now they have a pattern of directly misrepresenting material facts about the actions of the Prime Minister, while presenting them as factual news to its audience. I honestly never thought they'd do something like this, but the truth is the truth. I can see the facts, and hear the laughs. The BBC directly and willfully mislead their viewers about the Prime Minister's interaction with constituents. They have lost a lot of credibility and respect from me, and is especially hurtful in an era when untainted, reliable, and factual news and information is increasingly difficult to find. They also changed their website to a more tabloid-like interface. It used to look much more credible, and was nice to navigate. Now it looks less official than Yahoo News. Also, the content quality of the articles has taken a nosedive. I definitely rolled my eyes at a few recently. Just crappy writing and reporting. I miss my old BBC. Without trying to cause a political argument here. This is directly a result of the Tories. The BBC lost a lot of funding over the last few years. That also included money they used for their website. Lots of really cool stuff they did, even their tech blogs, shut down. They even had to move Newsbeat, which is a younger demographic news, into the main BBC News website. I know the BBC has other scandals, and done other things, but specifically the stuff you're saying, I miss it too. I remember when the BBC branched out into all sorts of stuff. Now it's slowly becoming a Tory mouthpiece. The charter renewal happening under the Tories being in power did not help anything. I'm hoping that, if we do get a Labour government in, they'll fund the BBC in other ways, scrap the TV license and extend its remit and impartiality again. What this does highlight is how susceptible we, the people, are to the social cues of respect vs laughter. It is such a powerful force that the BBC, and others, attempt to control it. Laugh tracks probably kept a few shows around for entire seasons. Friends without a laugh track is really awkward. It gets said every time on these types of comments that shows with a live audience or laugh track are paced around them. You can't just remove the laugh track and expect it to maintain a good comedic pacing. Imagine a stand-up set where nobody laughed, but the comedian still paused for it. Thanks for pointing this out. I suffer a brain aneurysm every time someone mentions that a show is awkward if you remove the laugh track. Your stand-up comparison is a good one. Furthermore, plenty shows are just not funny in the first place, so adding a gaping pause only makes it worse when the social cue isn't there. But what comes first, the laugh track or the bad jokes that necessitate a laugh track? The laugh track came first. The live studio audience thing was started, based on live theater. That is how all the early actors learned to act. The idea of acting naturally is more recent. The live studio audience was only for comedy, for the laugh timing. There's no point in having an audience for a drama. The BBC are very afraid of a Labour government. It's sent the first time they've diddled with footage to save Bodjo's face. That's about all I can say. If a Labour government happens anyway, I wouldn't mind seeing a complete purge of the BBC staff from top to bottom to clear all the politicised filth the Tories have been adding for the last 9 years. Everyone but Lion Kerr and Graham Norton, but besides those two, everybody out. Jesus. Will nobody think of Sir Attenborough? The travesty. Sir David. PM Attenborough. Fun fact for everyone, Robbie Gibb, a hard Brexiteer, ran both the BBC's political coverage of both Brexit and the 2017 election. Immediately after he left to go and work for the Sam in Downing Street, it was revealed that he was one of the people who made sure the Brexiteer arguments and people like Farage got more airtime. Have you watched the thick of it? It's basically what I imagine the real-life version of Malcolm Tucker would be like. That would be Alastair Campbell. Some of the guys these days make Campbell seem like a puppy. Not many manage to help launder false intelligence for multiple illegal wars, but yeah, I won't say things are exactly improving. Yeah, but that was in foreign land, so it doesn't matter. Isn't the BBC state-owned? Or are they simply subsidized by the gov and remain independent? The latter, but the government has many ways to indirectly exert influence, because they fund the BBC and choose the people who head the board. That just sounds like state-owned with extra steps. Lots of European organizations have very convoluted legal structures that allow them to technically be independent of the government while still being government-owned. The Dutch train services, for example, a profit-seeking company. The only odd thing is that the Dutch government is the sole shareholder. What does independent of the government mean? Serious question. Well, a government-run organization would be beholden to some part of the bureaucracy, and the directives would flow from the gov down to the organization. If the PM wants a different thing every day, the organization gets different instructions every day. Something like the CBC or the BBC has its own board, its own bureaucracy, and there is no legal way that any part of the government can directly tell it what to do. For regulation and oversight purposes, you have other independent commissions set up with limited scope and limited power to give the organization directives. If the PM doesn't like what he sees, tough shit. To change it, the smallest barrier is that he has to get a new commission set up and passed through the legislative system. Which closely resembles how a gov would change a completely non-gov associated organization. Can any local give a layman's explanation of the news situation in the UK/Western Europe? I'm familiar with the situation in the US, as part of my research involved it, but I have no context for the news funding and propagation over the pond. Any number/name/citations would be welcome. The UK media is mainly owned by millionaires and billionaires, and has a very blatant rightward lean. They pretty much do the Conservatives campaigning for them, and are a big part of why they are consistently polling over 40% despite having almost universally unlikable leaders who say something nasty every time they're in public. They choose what news to highlight and what to bury, so every time Labour is catching up to the Tories in the polls, suddenly there's a burst of articles and questions and opinion pieces about the supposed antisemitism in that party. Meanwhile, hardly anyone asks about the antisemitism and Islamophobia and racism and homophobia that's running rampant throughout the right-wing Tories and Brexit party, starting at the top with the Prime Minister. The bit you missed out there is that, while newspapers have obvious editorial bias, TV/radio news broadcasters, and especially the BBC, as a publicly funded organization, are supposed to have a principle of impartiality, so can't be seen to favor any specific political party or position. It's why any debate about climate change always has one climate-denying wacko and one scientist, because of BBC balance. Nevertheless, the BBC give huge amounts of airtime to Nigel Farage, who has much less actual representation in the political system than, say, the Liberal Democrats, and have been caught several times recently editing footage of Boris Johnson to make him look better. It's why any debate about climate change always has one climate-denying wacko and one scientist, because of BBC balance. TBF, that's certainly not something unique to the BBC. Is this a reputable news source? Edit. Thanks for silver, kind stranger. I'd encourage everyone to watch the comparison video itself. It looks like the video was from a news recap and was edited down for time. The fact that they showed a different clip of his response than what he actually responded feels just as bad as editing the laughter out. In the real response, he's barely stable on his feet and has a tone as if he's the butt of a joke. In the edited response, he's standing still, his head doesn't wobble, and he has a more assertive tone. They showed his second. I think it's absolutely vital, because it's easier to hear. The clapping had died down, which is why he repeated himself in the first place. Yeah, I don't understand how this is a scandal. Sure, people can interpret that someone cut out the laughing to make it sound better somehow. But in my experience, it's rather normal to cut out laughter, clapping and other interruptions if you need to cut the material down to just a few seconds that can be used during the evening news, for example. Yeah, I don't understand how this is a scandal. It's called manufactured outrage. I'm a British citizen that once worked for the BBC. I'm not proud of either of these things at the moment. As an American, I tune into the national evening news to watch the farce. You'll barely hear a peep about Epstein, 15 seconds if you're lucky. If you look at global reports, people are exposing the wealthy for their abuses, especially crimes against children. In the last year and a half, a number of people have come forward to expose organized child abuse rings. Almost every single whistleblower is dead, some publicly stating they would be killed, and they were right. It seems that everything is bubbling up to the surface, and just when the world begins to wake up, YouTube starts deleting channels that aren't commercially viable. There are a good number of channels documenting the corrupt, and they have already begun to disappear. Something's fucky. Something's fucky. Yeah, it's called right-wing governments. Well, if you're gonna get your own Trump, you might as well get your own Fox News too, right? Regardless of what people think of the BBC in light of this. The difference between them and Fox News is night and day. Fox News reporting style is essential, not allowed to be broadcast in the UK. In fact, Fox News stopped reporting in the UK after several rulings against it by Ofcom, as there are very stringent rules all TV news broadcasts must follow, which is typically why broadcast news is preferable to newspapers, who have no regulation but themselves. We used to have a fairness doctrine in the US, but that went out window in the late 80s. But